welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be Matt Moscona. He is host of After Further Review on ESPN Radio throughout the state of Louisiana. We will talk LSU football. Our episode is sponsored by The Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water. The Well is a coffee house with a mission to bring clean water to the world. To date, over 30 communities across the globe now have access to safe water, health, and hope. You too can make an impact by visiting a Well Coffee House location today. There are 5 locations to serve you in the Nashville area: Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, Bellevue, and the Cool Springs Lifeway. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. Today's news is sponsored by Sutherland & Belk, a local injury law firm committed to helping those who have been injured in accidents. If you or someone you know has been in a wreck or an accident, reach out to Sutherland & Belk and see what your rights are. You can find their contact info online at sbinjurylaw.com. The men's basketball team has announced its non-conference schedule for this year. Vanderbilt starts with an exhibition game against Clark Atlanta on November the 1st. The regular season schedule looks like this: Southeast Missouri State, Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, Richmond, Austin Peay, South Carolina State, Southeastern Louisiana, Buffalo, Liberty, Loyola of Chicago, UNC Wilmington, Davidson, and SMU. Today's guest line is presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on Boll & Branch sheets for many years now. I had no clue how much I would like them until I got them. They are fair trade certified. That means they're made under safe conditions by men and women, treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you're not going to want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled BOLL. Enter the promo code Vandy and get $50 off your first set of sheets. Joining me now, Matt Moscona of ESPN Radio. I want to say Baton Rouge, but Matt is all over the state. He is a well-known personality down there. Matt, thank you for joining us today to talk some LSU.
Hey, Chris, my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into football, I want to talk about basketball. We talked about how strange a program it is. That program has been so up and down. It's now got the Will Wade situation, which is a different question that we'll get into in a second. But why is that program so schizophrenic, for lack of a better word, over its history?
It's actually a really good word, because the highs have been super high, like Bob Pettit, Pistol Pete, Shaq, Ben Simmons, like number 1 pick in the draft type high. And the lows have been, Johnny Jones at the end of that era, go 2-16 in the conference. And honestly, the reason is just fan expectation. It's such a football school, and the basketball success has never been consistent, that if football is doing well, fans will get distracted and they just won't pressure the administration to consistently be great in basketball. So if the basketball team is sliding, fans will just disengage. It doesn't ramp up this sort of animus. It's just apathy. It goes the other direction. So it is odd, but man, when they're going good around here and the basketball team is playing well, it is a really fun basketball school. But you're right, it's been schizophrenic at best.
Well, it has certainly gone well under Will Wade. Of course, there's a whole host of other issues that have come with that. The NCAA issues, I don't even know where they stand on investigations and that sort of thing. It has been the weirdest deal. Where is LSU? Where is Will Wade right now? Where do you see this going in the near future, or maybe the distant future?
Well, in the literal sense, they're in Spain. They're on an overseas trip right now. That you get to do that every 4 years. So they're playing 4 games internationally in Spain while they're taking that trip and kind of acclimating a new roster. I mean, Chris, my point with this all along with Will Wade, and I understand Joe Oliva was the athletic director, and Joe hired Will, and athletic directors are always going to give their guy the benefit of the doubt, because ultimately that's a reflection on their legacy. But you have a new athletic director now, but there was no doubt that the administration, the athletic administration, was supporting Will Wade through that whole scenario. Scott Woodward has continued to say the same. Now, what will be interesting is if, and it remains an if if there is evidence that comes forth more than just singular sourced circumstantial evidence, albeit I understand the optics of it are terrible. Don't misunderstand me. And I'm not the guy that would defend LSU to the death or anything like that. But it's also a situation where you've had a singularly sourced, unsubstantiated report where there isn't really a smoking gun. I think absent that, Chris, and with Will Wade continuing to win, status quo is going to remain here. And it's hard to imagine that changing.
Privately, what do you think the deal is? Does he have a plausible story, a plausible explanation for it? Or is that just a case where LSU says, hey, there's not much evidence, he's not saying much? Or is it just kind of a game of chicken with the NCAA, which really hasn't had any teeth for a long time?
Well, I think Will Wade wanted to make sure. I mean, Chris, there's a lot of layers to the story going back to when he wouldn't take the meeting, when Will wouldn't take the meeting with LSU initially. And as bits and pieces of that story have been told, ultimately, Will was going to meet with Joe Oliva. When more parties started coming to the table to be involved in that meeting, that's when Will said, okay, I need representation with me if I'm going to take this meeting with the NCAA and with attorneys. And when that was denied is when Will pulled back. And that's what created a very ugly situation that took place there. And the public perception became, well, he's not speaking because he has something to hide, which, Chris, you understand the nature of college basketball. I do as well. I'm not naive. There's a federal case going on right now exploring the corruption in college basketball because we know what happens. I'm not sitting here arguing that Will Wade's hands are completely clean, but I can also understand from the standpoint of LSU that they're not going to cater just to public perception and absent something that is more definitive. I don't think they're going to move a successful coach, and I'm not sure that any school would. John Calipari's had 2 Final Fours vacated. He's got maybe the best job in college basketball. Bruce Pearl had a show cause. He just let Auburn do a Final Four. He had one of his assistants arrested, and he's still got a job. I'm not justifying it. I just think this is the culture within college basketball, and I think LSU's playing ball like a lot of other schools are.
Yeah, I think your answer is a good one. My question is, where is this 5 years from now? Is there a completely different amateur model? Is there a splitting off from the NCAA by programs? I really have no idea where this is going next.
Yeah, that answer is way above my pay grade. I can tell you what I would love to see, and I would love to see college basketball, men's college basketball and college football be completely disassociated with the NCAA. Because the NCAA at one point, Chris, served, and in some instances still serves a very legitimate purpose. It's to put on championships for intercollegiate athletics and to be sort of that jurisdiction. For Division III lacrosse, they could use a model like the NCAA. For Division II cross country, they could use the NCAA. For college football, where athletic departments generate 9 figures annually, the NCAA, they've outgrown the NCAA and its purpose. I would love to see a scenario where the leagues, the Power 5 conferences, independently run their own organizations for football and for men's college basketball. Now, I don't think that that's realistic. I certainly don't think it's realistic within 5 years from now. But if we get to a point where we bring a lot of these conversations with agents and paying players, and maybe even players being allowed to be compensated for their image and likeness, if we bring that above board, it alleviates a lot of the pressure. If when Zion Williamson is at Duke, he could sign a shoe deal with Nike, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with 18-year-old Zion signing a shoe deal at Nike if he can get that market value? And then that alleviates a lot of this pressure of wrongdoing. There's, Chris, you set me off on a tangent, man, but I think there's a very big difference between things that are unethical or immoral, and I don't think that's part of this conversation. I don't think there's anything immoral or unethical about somebody making money off of their personal value. It may be against the rules. I would say similar to running a red light. Like we've been at this. Everyone's been in this situation, Chris, where it's late at night. You come up to a red light. You look left. You look right. There's nobody with as far as the eye can see, so you run the red light. Is that unethical? Is that immoral? No. Is it against the law? Yes. And if there's a cop sitting right there and he gives you a ticket, you got to pay it because you broke the rule, because that's the rule. But I don't think this is a question of ethics or morality. And similarly with college athletics, I don't think that there's an ethical or moral issue here. I think it's something that's an arbitrary rule that the NCAA has put in place that is antiquated, needs to go away. So I will step off of my soapbox now and we can continue.
Well, and I'll just say I couldn't agree with your answer more. I will not comment other than that, because I could also go off on a soapbox because I've said many of the same things. But we've got a few minutes left and we've got football to talk, and let's go into that. What is the temperature around the program with Ed Orgeron? How happy are fans and boosters? What's the vibe around that program in general?
I don't know if it's a complete 180 from this time a year ago, but it's close. Yeah, last year, when you consider, first of all, Ed wasn't a unanimously popular hire. I hated the hire, Chris, and candidly, I thought LSU completely did itself and its program a disservice by promoting Ed Orgeron and not doing its due diligence to go bigger with a more established coach. But after that first year, when you lose to Troy and you get blown out by Mississippi State and you lose a bowl game to Notre Dame, and you have the worst recruiting class in more than a decade. There were a lot of people at the beginning of last season who looked at projected win totals, at 7.5 and said, this is it for Ed. And I don't mean, Chris, I don't mean fans. I mean boosters, administrators, like people who were actually going to make those decisions. And they up and surprised everybody, man. They get a really nice win against Georgia. They go on the road and beat Auburn. They win 10 games. They get to a New Year's Six bowl. And now you've got so much of that team returning. Now you've got expectation. You got a preseason top 10 team. You got a fifth-year senior quarterback. You've got a lot of excitement and expectation around this program now, which you didn't have a year ago. So the people are excited. I think the question now for Ed is he a good front runner? We know now that when his back's against the wall, if people are doubting him, he's a pretty good underdog. But what about when you have expectation? Can you continue scaling that mountain? That's where we'll get that answer this year.
Well, expectations are always an issue there. The other issue now is injuries, which from what I read seem to really be piling up. What's the latest? What is something of significance that could carry into the season?
Well, the biggest that could carry into the season is what happened actually yesterday at practice. Ed Orgeron disclosed that there was a serious injury to five-star offensive guard Cardell Thomas. He's a true freshman, but Chris, he was going to play. I don't know that he would have started week one, but he certainly would have been on the field an awful lot. And Ed wouldn't disclose the exact nature of the injury, only that Cardell would require surgery and that he's going to be out for quite a while and might miss the season. So that's significant. Everything else has just been kind of camp injuries. Joe Burrow, somebody hit Joe Burrow in the non-contact drill and nicked his shoulder a little bit. He's back at practice now, but that's like the kind of thing where the coach chews the player all the way to the sideline into the locker room, like get off the field for hitting the quarterback. Grant Delpit tweaked a hamstring, but he's back out at practice now. Christian Fulton, cornerback, projected first-round pick. He had foot surgery last year, maybe had some inflammation there, and so they just gave him a few days off. It's a lot of that, Chris. Just what you deal with through camp. The tricky part is when the media only gets to see 10 or 15 minutes of practice and it's individual drills, and you're expected to put together a camp report, but you're not really seeing anything, all you can do really is call roll. So that's kind of been the report every day. It's just guys out there calling roll, and some guys have missed. But overall, the only one that's really serious at this point that I think will cost anybody game time is the offensive lineman, is Cardell Thomas. Yeah,
that sounds like my camp challenge too, by the way.
Yeah, it's everybody's, right?
Oh, it is. I mean, and here's the thing.
Coaches lock us out,
Well, and if you've been connected enough, I've done this 17 years now, a lot of it part-time. I mean, I've got several people that talk to me off the record. I end up getting a lot of what I need anyway. So in that sense, a lot of it seems, I mean, I think I understand why, but when you're connected and you get stuff other ways, some of it does seem a little silly.
Yes, it is, especially when you look at the NFL and the NFL mandates open practices to the media. If Bill Belichick, the greatest coach in the history of football, has to have his practices open to the media, why does it matter? Like, why would Derek Mason or Ed Ogeron be closing people out? I mean, what top secret reinvention of football are you doing behind closed doors there? I don't know.
Yeah, I keep waiting to come away with the nuclear launch codes from one of these things.
and the bigger joke is when you look at LSU's offense for the last decade, what exactly do you think you're hiding from everybody?
Well, that's a good question because from what I'm hearing, the run-pass option is going to be more part of things. From what I hear, that fits Joe Burrow's game. He's one of the better quarterbacks they've had in a few years, it seems. What are the expectations for him this year?
I'll tell you flatly, I think he'll be a 3,000-yard passer this year, and that's been a rarity at LSU. In the history of the program, Rohan Davey did it in 2001. Jamarcus Russell did it in 2006. Zach Mettenberger did it in 2013, and that's it. I mean, those are the only guys in the history of the program that have thrown for 3,000 yards in the season. And I think I think Joe Burrow is going to do it this year. He was just about 100 yards away from it last year, and that's really after. You got to understand, Chris. A year ago at this time, like August a year ago, Joe Burrow wasn't even the starting quarterback. He was taking fourth-team reps. Like, he had just gotten to campus. So his, baptism into the SEC very much was by fire. I mean, he was named the starter, and then it was like you had a week to get ready for Miami and Dallas at Jerry World. And so there was a transition during the season with Joe into that starter role. But when you go and look at his stats, just pull up a game-by-game stat sheet for Joe Burrow and look at what happened in November. And he just hit that curve and took off. And I think he will carry that into this season. He's got top 5 pass catchers from a year ago are all back. They have 4 or 5 running backs that they like a lot. And then they brought in Joe Brady. You mentioned the run pass option portion of it. Joe Brady was with the Saints. I think most people probably know that Taysom Hill package the Saints ran last year. Brady gets a lot of credit for bringing that in. So I don't think there's any doubt that they're going to look different, man. I tell people all the time, Chris, like that ask about this. I don't know if it's going to work. I know it's going to look different. I watched LSU in their spring game, and they didn't take a single snap from under center. Like, think about what I just said. LSU did not take a single snap under center. They don't huddle anymore. Again, I don't know if it will work, but it will look different on the field.
That's definitely a new world for them. Matt, let me get a couple more questions, then I'll get you out of here. I know that LSU's always got talent. You got a situation with a stud freshman running back there. Just tell us who are the key faces that we need to know this season on that side of the ball.
Are you talking about young people or just on the offensive side in general?
Well, just the main players on offense and who you expect to have big years.
Joe Burrow, of course, at quarterback. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the guy at running back who's now the veteran and is going to take the lion's share. But really, Chris, I don't think they have a 1,000-yard rusher this year. I think you're going to see a season where you have 5 players all contribute greatly at the running back spot, and probably Clyde and maybe Ty Davis-Price or John Emery, one of the freshmen, high 4-star, 5-star freshmen, emerge. Ed Ogeron talks so much about his USC days with Pete Carroll. And if you remember those offenses, man, it was Reggie Bush and Lendale White. He had, the thunder and lightning for, if you want to go totally cliche on it. Well, Clyde is kind of that shifty guy, and Ty Davis-Price, the freshman, is probably more of that thunder, that between the tackles, big, 6'2", 240 type running back that could be a load between the tackles. But I think you're going to have 5 guys contribute. At receiver, Justin Jefferson is a returning all-conference guy, but he's not a flashy guy. He's just very steady. The guy that I think, if you want to name to say, okay, it's August 15th when we record this, circle back in 3 months and see if Matt was right. The guy I'd give you is Jamar Chase. He's a sophomore wide receiver. Every time he was on the field last year, he made plays. And now another year into the offense, I just think, especially in this offense where they're going to spread it out and throw it more, that's a guy who's primed for like a major breakout type year where at the end of the season, you're looking going, where did that kid come from? But that's the guy I tell you to look out for. He wears number 1. He's from Rummel in New Orleans. which is really a polished football factory of sorts. So he showed up at LSU not just as an athlete playing receiver, but as a guy who technically knows the position. And I think he is poised for a monster year.
Well, Matt, LSU is always loaded at defensive back, always got terrific linemen. They've been putting out a lot of linebackers lately, including one, Jacob Phillips from Nashville. I guess
Sure.
4 guys that got a chance to be first-team All-SEC if it goes well. I know their defense is always good. Do they take a step up this year? I mean, I know they lost some key players, but there's an awful lot of good ones still around.
Yeah, it's strange because like they lose Devin White and they lose Greedy Williams, so it's hard to say like you lose 2 guys that were All-America caliber players. One the Butkus is the best linebacker in college football, and you're not gonna miss a beat. But the thing is, like they really have just like don't misunderstand me. They don't have another Devin White. Like they've never had a Devin White in the history of their program. The guy won the Butkus Award. But you mentioned Phillips, and they've really got 4 guys that can play inside backer, and any of those 4 could be a 100 tackle guy this year based on how the reps are divvied up. So they've got not only depth but really talented depth there as well. And then I think and they're always good in the secondary. It's just Grant Delpit and Christian Fulton are projected first round picks. They're just Derek Stingley, who's the number 1 player in the country, he'll start at the other corner, and he's just a specimen. But so they're always good there. Where LSU has taken a step back in recent years has been at defensive line. When they were winning and competing for championships, LSU had guys like Chad Lavallee and Marcus Spears and Marquise Hill and Drake Nevis and Kyle Williams and Claude Roden and Sam Montgomery and Barkevius Mingo. Guys that went on to be like high NFL draft picks and were All-Americans, and they just haven't had that over the last half decade, man. It's been a while since they've cycled those guys through, and it feels like this year may be a year where the defensive line looks like a traditional LSU defensive line again. They've got a lot of veteran leadership up there too, man. Rashard Lawrence and Braden Fehoko are both seniors. They got 2 nose tackles that they really like a lot, including Tyler Shelvin, who was the number 1 player in Louisiana 3 years ago when he signed. And then they get Caleb Chasson off of injury. And if you want a name defensively, Chris, like I gave you Jamar Chase on offense. If you want a name defensively for LSU, that's the one, is Chasson. He was supposed to be a breakout edge rusher last year, and he tore his ACL in the first game of the season against Miami. Well, he's back 100%, and he's that guy who is the Adonis who gets off the bus, the long arm, edge rusher, the freakishly fast guy that comes off the edge and just harasses quarterbacks. That's Caleb Chasson, and they need him to have a special type year, like an Arden Key or a Barkevius Mingo type year, and if he does, that defense could be scary, scary good.
Matt, we covered a lot of ground today. Is there anything that we should have discussed that we didn't, any storylines out there that are worth mentioning?
We can always go baseball, Chris.
Yes, we could. If you got time, I'm happy to do that too, by the way. So,
they last year obviously was a disappointing year for LSU, where they were preseason number 1 and then ended up not even being a national seed. They lost a super regional to Florida State, though. They return a lot. They return their entire pitching staff and a lot of really talented arms, but they got to maximize it, man, because people around here, you go back-to-back years without getting to Omaha, and people start tapping their feet, man. It's just you know how we started talking about expectation around basketball? It's a 180 around baseball. Paul Maneri earned a national seed 6 straight years, but didn't win a championship in that run, and people were disappointed. That's the nature of the baseball expectation around Baton Rouge as well. So I think it's going to be a very, very important year for Paul Maneri. If they fall short of Omaha again this year, with a new athletic director, you wonder, might Scott Woodward be inclined to entertain, making a change, which sounds ludicrous, the type of run Maneri's had here. And I'm not saying I would endorse it, but man, ADs like to have their guys in place. And this is a year for LSU where they will have a loaded pitching staff, and they return a ton of talent from last year. And if they're not in Omaha in June, it will be a massive disappointment.
Well, and that's the thing, is I watched them late in the year. Some of their pitching came back, especially some of the young guys, Cole Henry. What do you think they are if they don't get ravaged by injury on the pitching side?
Oh, this past year?
Yes.
This is a cop out because they won the national title, but they would have looked a lot like Vanderbilt. There was a reason those two weren't they 1-2 in the preseason? LSU and Vandy, or they were both top
They
five.
were, and it depended. I think Vanderbilt ended up getting the nod by most people, but I think it was like I talked to Aaron Fitt last year before the season as they were trying to come up with stuff, and it was LSU and Vandy, and at first he had LSU, and then he kind of switched, but yeah, at one point in time it was that close.
There was a reason for it. LSU returned Zach Watson and Antoine Duplantis and Zach Hess. They all bypassed the draft. And then they signed the number one class in the country. And, you had a couple of guys that turned down seven figures. Just like, a Kumar Rocker situation. You had guys turn down seven figures to show up on campus. And you had Daniel Cabrera coming back, who was a guy who a year ago turned down seven figures to show up on campus. So, last year was a team for LSU that had their pitching stayed healthy throughout the year, they would have been I'm not saying they would have won the national title, because I think Vanderbilt by the time you got to June they were just better than everybody, and it was obvious. But they could have been like that. They would have been in that class. They would have been in Omaha and had a chance to make a run. But they'll get all those guys back healthy next year. Your entire pitching staff returns. So year older, year healthier. We better see you in Nebraska next year, man. I'm telling you, there's not a lot of patience around here for missing Omaha 3 straight years.
Well, the issue was they had so much of the lineup back this year, coming into this year, but they lose Josh Smith, and I think they lost a couple other guys. So that's kind of my question: is how ready are they on that side of the thing?
So you do lose Smith, and you lose Watson and Duplantis. But Saul Garza's back, and he really rode a heater toward the end of the season. Just a big power bat behind the plate. You get Daniel Cabrera back. A guy that they love is Giovanni DiGiacomo, who, a good friend of mine is Ryan Terrio, played at LSU, and of course played a long time in the major leagues. He said of all the guys on the team, DiGiacomo is as close a thing as they've got to a surefire big leaguer. He'll slide over and play center. They got a kid named Braden Doty. I'm sorry, Cade Doty. Braden's on the team already, his brother. But Cade Doty signed. He was the number one player in Louisiana. He turned down seven figures to come to LSU, and he very well could be the day one shortstop replacing Josh Smith. You hate to say it this way, Chris, because it's just unfair, but it's kind of that situation where you get the can't miss prospect like Alex Bregman, and you plug him in day one at shortstop, and he plays that position for 3 years. I'm not telling you he's Bregman. I'm just saying it's that type of thing where you got a guy who's showing up on campus and he's going to play day one and he's never going to give up that spot. So they're in there. And then you had a lot of young guys last year that got experience. After the way they got sort of snake bitten last year by injuries, I'd be cautious with anything, but I'd also say I know what the expectations are around that program, and they've always got a loaded gun. They also changed hitting coaches. So, Sean O'Chink goes out, and they brought in Eddie Smith, who was a player under Maneri at Notre Dame. So look to maybe inject some life and maybe some new concepts into that offense as well this year.
Well, Vandy goes to the box for 3 games this year, and I'm thinking that could be just a classic.
I'd love to see it, man. I remember the last time Vandy was here, and LSU had a lot of success against some really good arms the last time. But whenever LSU and Vanderbilt get together, you're usually looking at 2 rosters full of future big leaguers, which is always fun at this level.
Yeah, and it'll be the same thing this next year too. Matt, thank you for joining us. You already went over the time that we talked about, and I appreciate you doing that, but it was a fun conversation. Tell people where they can find you on Twitter and where they can listen to your shows.
Yeah, if you go on any social media platform and you search my name, you'll find me, but good luck with the vowels. It's Moscona, Matt Moscona. And then we're on, you can start with ESPN Baton Rouge. It's 1045ESPN.com in Baton Rouge, and you can stream us there, audio or video.
Thank you so much, Matt.
My pleasure, Chris. Thanks, man.
Before we go, a big thanks to independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood for sponsoring our question and answer session. If you need an independent insurance agent who wants to know your unique needs and circumstances and will tailor an insurance plan to fit them. Josh is your guy. Call him at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/JDMintonHQ. He's my agent. Give him a shot. I think you'll be pleased. And call Josh, too, about opportunities to help out with Camp Horizon. That is a camp for kids who have cancer. We'll drop one more episode of the podcast on Saturday. Until then, everybody have a great weekend. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast.